A New Jersey warehouse just lost another 800,000 ounces of silver, and almost nobody watching the markets noticed. But here's what makes that number genuinely disturbing. While silver is quietly disappearing from a major US vault, China is doing almost the exact opposite of what it did just 1 year ago. China was sending silver out to the world. Now it's pulling enormous amounts back in. And when you put those two movements on the same timeline, silver leaving American warehouses while China starts absorbing it, the pattern becomes very difficult to ignore. The question isn't simply where the silver went. The real question is why someone is suddenly willing to take so much of it off the market. And that's exactly what we're going to uncover. By the end of this video, you'll understand why silver just became one of the most contested commodities on Earth, why families who've never owned a single ounce of it are suddenly paying attention, and why some analysts think the next 12 months could look very different from anything silver has done in decades. This isn't about hype. It's about paperwork, ports, and warehouses. The boring stuff that actually moves markets. And if you're interested in money, investing gold, silver, and protecting your financial future, subscribe to Money Insights and like this video, because every week we break down the biggest financial stories in simple English. Let's start with the basics, because you need this to understand everything else. Silver isn't just jewelry. It's inside your phone, it's inside solar panels, it's inside electric vehicles, medical equipment, and the data centers running the artificial intelligence boom you keep hearing about. Roughly half of all silver mined every year doesn't go into coins or bars. It gets used up permanently in industry. That matters, because unlike gold, which mostly sits in vaults forever, silver gets consumed, burned through, gone. For years, one country helped keep the global silver market balanced: China. Throughout 2025, China exported around 5,100 tons of silver, acting as a steady supplier to the rest of the world. Factories in Europe, refiners in India, industrial buyers in the United States, many of them relied, at least in part, on silver flowing out of China. Then, almost overnight, that flow reversed. Two completely different groups of buyers were responsible, and neither one was reacting to the other. That matters because when two independent sources of demand hit the same market at the same time, they don't cancel each other out. They compete for the same physical supply. And that's where this story starts getting much bigger than China. The first group was ordinary people, retail investors. Regular Chinese households treat physical metal ownership the way many Western families treat a savings account. It's mainstream, not niche. But in January 2026, gold prices climbed toward roughly $5,500 an ounce, pricing many everyday savers out of the gold market entirely. So they did what savers have done throughout history when their preferred store of value gets too expensive. They moved to the next best option: silver. But here's where everything changes. At the exact same time, an entirely separate group was buying silver for a completely different reason, and it had nothing to do with savings at all. On January 9, 2026, officials in Beijing announced that a long-standing export tax rebate for solar products would be eliminated. Effective April 1st, China dominates global solar panel manufacturing, and solar panels require silver paste as a critical component. The moment that deadline was announced, manufacturers had a powerful financial incentive to ship as much finished product out the door as possible before the rebate disappeared. To do that, they needed silver immediately in bulk. Reports from inside the industry describe solar and electronics manufacturers paying premiums of 8 to 12% above spot prices just to lock in supply, with delivery times that once took 2 to 4 weeks stretching out to 12 or 16 weeks. That's not a minor inconvenience. That's a supply chain under real strain. So you had two completely different groups of buyers hitting the same market at the same time. Savers looking for an alternative to expensive gold, and factories racing to secure the silver they needed before a regulatory deadline. Neither group was buying because of the other, but both were competing for the same physical supply. And almost nobody noticed how unusual that convergence really was, and while all of this was happening, silver's price was doing something wild. On January 29, 2026, silver hit a record high of $121.60 an ounce. Just days later, it had fallen to $78. By early February, it briefly touched somewhere near $64. Massive swings in a matter of days on a metal that most people assume moves slowly. Now here's the part most people miss. Strong physical buying and a falling price chart aren't actually a contradiction. Chinese demand can set a floor under the market without controlling the day-to-day price, which is driven heavily by futures trading, leverage, and speculative positioning in places like New York and London. Physical buying tells you something different than the ticker does. It tells you what's actually leaving warehouses, permanently. And that brings us to the second half of this story, because while China was pulling silver inward, something was also happening inside COMEX, the exchange in New York, where most of the world's silver futures trade. and where the metal backing those contracts is stored in a handful of approved vaults, COMEX inventory gets split into two categories, and understanding the difference is the key to understanding everything that follows. There's registered silver, metal that carries a warrant and is legally available to satisfy a delivery request. And there's eligible silver, metal sitting in the same vaults, meeting the same quality standards, but not currently offered up for delivery. It might be owned privately. It might be held by an investor who has no intention of selling. Media headlines often report the two categories combined, which sounds reassuring. But only registered silver actually backs the market when someone demands physical delivery instead of settling in cash. And registered silver has been draining for years. Since 2021, registered stocks have fallen more than 70% from their highs. By the end of December 2025, registered COMEX silver inventory stood at roughly 128 million ounces, already the lowest level since February of that year. Then it kept falling. On February 10th, 2026, registered inventory dropped below 100 million ounces for the first time in months. Since then, something important has happened. Registered inventory has recovered somewhat, climbing back above 90 million ounces by late June, above 95 million by mid-July, and sitting close to 100 million ounces in early August. And that recovery changes the story. This isn't a simple case of silver disappearing from COMEX every single day with no interruption. The market has been able to rebuild part of its delivery cushion. But the bigger question is why the inventory fell so sharply in the first place, and whether that recovery is strong enough to withstand another surge in physical demand. Because markets are rarely as simple as either everything is fine or a shortage is guaranteed. Let's talk about why any of this should matter to a factory worker in Ohio, a retired teacher in Florida, or a young couple in Texas trying to buy their first home. None of them are trading silver futures. So why should they care? Because silver sits at the intersection of two things that touch every single household: the cost of the technology transition happening around the world, and the reliability of money itself as a store of value. Solar installations, electric grid upgrades, electric vehicles, and AI data center buildouts all require enormous and growing amounts of silver with no easy substitute at scale. At the same time, silver has historically served, rightly or wrongly, as a hedge that some investors turn to when they're worried about inflation, currency debasement, or instability in the broader financial system. When both of those forces pull on the same limited pool of metal at once, ordinary people feel it. In higher costs for solar installations, in electronics, possibly, some analysts argue, in the broader signals it sends about where investors think the economy is heading. Think about a retired couple who bought a small position in silver years ago simply as insurance, a modest hedge tucked away for a rainy day, not a bet they expected to move the needle on their retirement. A year like this one, with prices swinging from $60 to over $120 and back again, can be genuinely disorienting for someone who isn't used to watching commodity charts. It's worth saying clearly, volatility like this cuts both ways, and nobody should treat sharp moves in either direction as guaranteed to continue. Now let's zoom out. Because the China story and the COMEX story are both symptoms of something bigger. The silver market has run a supply deficit for 6 consecutive years. Estimates for how large the 2026 shortfall will be vary widely, from roughly 67 million ounces on the conservative end to well above 150 million ounces on the higher end, depending on the source and the assumptions used. Cumulatively, since 2021, those deficits are estimated to have approached or exceeded 800 million ounces, the equivalent of consuming roughly a full year's worth of global mine production that simply never got replaced. Here's the part that surprises most people. Unlike gold, silver mining doesn't respond quickly to price. Roughly 70% of the world's silver comes out of the ground as a byproduct of mining for lead, zinc, and copper. That means mining companies aren't primarily deciding how much silver to produce. They're deciding how much lead, zinc, and copper to produce. And the silver just comes along for the ride. Even when silver prices rose above $80 an ounce in early 2026, that alone wasn't enough to meaningfully change global output, because the economics of the mines are governed by entirely different metals. This tiny detail changes everything about how you should think about silver supply. It's not like oil, where a price spike quickly brings more drilling online. Silver supply is, in large part, structurally inflexible, locked to decisions made about entirely different commodities. Think about what that means in practice. A mining company deciding whether to expand a zinc operation in Peru or a lead mine in Mexico isn't running its numbers based on silver charts. It's running them based on zinc contracts and lead demand from batteries and construction. Silver just rides along as a byproduct, sometimes a small fraction of the revenue, sometimes almost an afterthought on the balance sheet. Which means that even a historic run in silver prices, even a spike toward $120 an ounce, doesn't necessarily trigger the kind of supply response you'd expect from a normal commodity. The mine doesn't dig faster just because silver got expensive. It digs at the pace the base metals dictate. That mismatch between price and supply response is part of why deficits can persist year after year without correcting themselves the way textbook economics might predict. Now picture a young couple in their early 30s, saving for their first home and watching electricity bills creep higher as their utility invests in solar and grid upgrades. They've probably never thought about silver mining in Peru, but the connection is real. Every solar panel, every grid upgrade, and every piece of electrical infrastructure competing for silver is drawing on a supply that can't simply scale up when demand suddenly jumps. If that metal becomes harder or more expensive to secure, the cost doesn't disappear. It eventually shows up somewhere, in equipment, installation, electricity infrastructure, or the speed at which new projects can actually be built. Now let's connect this back to China's export policy, because this is where the story gets its sharpest edge. In late December 2025, officials announced that China had designated 44 companies as authorized to export silver during 2026 and 2027. Then, effective January 1st, 2026, China's Ministry of Commerce implemented a 2-year special government license system for silver exports, replacing the quota system that had been in place since the year 2000. What that means, in plain English, is this. Silver leaving China is no longer a simple market transaction. It now runs through a licensing gate controlled by the government. Exports haven't stopped completely, but they're no longer free-flowing the way they used to be, regardless of how attractive the price might look to a foreign buyer. Combine that licensing restriction with domestic demand from solar manufacturing, retail investors, and, some analysts have pointed out, growing applications tied to electrical grid expansion and defense-adjacent industries, and you get a one-directional pressure valve. Silver flows into China. Very little flows back out. Almost nobody noticed this shift happening in real time, buried as it was in trade bulletins and customs data releases. But by mid-2026, the evidence was piling up. In June alone, Chinese imports of silver-bearing ore jumped over 60% year over year, reaching more than 219,000 tons. Silver arriving not even as refined metal yet, but as raw ore waiting to be processed domestically. So here's the picture forming. A country that used to help balance the global silver market by exporting roughly 5,000 tons a year has, within a matter of months, become one of its most aggressive importers, while simultaneously making it harder for silver to leave once it's inside its borders. That's not a small shift. That's one of the most dramatic demand reversals seen in a major commodity market in recent memory. But here's where we need a reality check, because a good documentary doesn't just build tension, it tests it. Not every analyst agrees on what this means for prices going forward. Some point to the recovery in COMEX registered inventory, climbing from under 90 million ounces back toward 100 million, as evidence that the supply squeeze narrative is, at minimum, more complicated than headlines suggest. Registered inventory can rise when eligible silver gets warranted for delivery, when ETF holdings shift, or when market participants simply decide it's profitable to move metal into deliverable form. A recovering registered stockpile doesn't necessarily mean the underlying tightness has disappeared, but it does mean the picture isn't a straight line toward crisis. There's also this. Silver has been volatile before, and dramatic price swings, like the plunge from $121 to $64 in a matter of days back in early February, are a reminder that leveraged futures markets can move violently in both directions, disconnected at times from the slower-moving physical fundamentals. Markets often react to positioning and momentum long before they react to a spreadsheet of deficit numbers. Some analysts believe silver could continue climbing as deficits compound. Others believe a period of consolidation, or even a meaningful pullback, is just as likely after such an extreme run. Silver is still up roughly 70% over the past year alone, an enormous move that historically tends to invite profit-taking and sharp corrections. But there's still one major force sitting above this entire story: the Federal Reserve. Because silver isn't driven by physical supply alone. The price investors see every day is also shaped by interest rates, the dollar, and the cost of holding an asset that pays no yield. And in 2026, all three of those variables have become unusually difficult to read. And there's one more thread that ties directly back to all of this and the Federal Reserve. Kevin Warsh took over as Fed chair in May of 2026, promising what he called regime change in how the central bank operates. At his July 29th meeting, the Fed held its benchmark rate steady in a range between 3.5% and 3.75%, the fifth straight meeting without a change. But it wasn't unanimous. 3 regional Fed presidents dissented, pushing instead for a rate hike, arguing inflation hadn't been tamed. Warsh, for his part, was deliberately vague about what comes next. saying the committee wouldn't provide forward guidance and would instead observe market reaction to developments direct and unfiltered. Markets didn't love the uncertainty. Stocks sold off that afternoon, and bond yields moved higher. Oh, why does that matter for silver? Historically, precious metals tend to be sensitive to where investors think real interest rates and the dollar are heading. A Fed that stays uncertain, that leaves the door open to hikes while facing internal disagreement, creates exactly the kind of ambiguity that can send some investors looking for a hedge, and others running from anything that doesn't pay a yield. It's not a guarantee in either direction. It's simply another variable, stacked on top of an already unusual year for silver. Consider a factory worker assembling circuit boards for a mid-sized electronics manufacturer somewhere in the American Midwest. Silver is soldered into nearly every board that passes through that facility, in tiny amounts that most consumers never think about. When silver becomes scarcer or pricier at the industrial level, the pressure doesn't announce itself with a headline. It shows up quietly in a supplier's renegotiated contract, in a slightly thinner margin the company has to absorb, or in a decision about whether to pass the cost along to customers. Multiply that across thousands of manufacturers worldwide, electronics, medical devices, batteries, solar, and you start to see how a shift in Chinese trade policy thousands of miles away can eventually touch a paycheck in Ohio. Here's another angle almost nobody talks about. Silver's dual identity is exactly what makes it so unpredictable. Gold behaves almost entirely as a monetary asset. Investors buy it, central banks hoard it, and very little of it gets consumed. Silver has one foot in that same monetary world and one foot in industrial demand that behaves more like copper or lithium. That split personality means silver can be pulled in two directions at once, by fear-driven investors seeking a hedge and by factories that need it regardless of what the price is doing. When both of those buyer groups lean in at the same time, as they did in China during the first quarter of 2026, the effect on a market already running structural deficits can be outsized. Step back for a second and think about what all of this actually means for an ordinary family. They may never buy a single ounce of silver, but the forces behind this story, a global race for the metals powering the technology transition, China tightening its grip on a strategic resource, and a Federal Reserve still fighting inflation under new leadership, can eventually show up in energy costs, borrowing costs, technology prices, and the purchasing power of the money in their bank account. Silver isn't just a trade for commodity investors. It's a barometer of a much bigger economic shift. As of this week, silver is trading in the mid-$60 range, having pulled back slightly after touching a 7-week high, with investors cautiously watching for the next round of U.S. inflation data. It's up over 10% in the past month alone, and roughly 70% compared to a year ago, but still well below the record high it briefly touched back in January. That gap between where silver is now and where it spiked earlier this year is itself part of the story. Markets rarely move in a straight line, and the space between panic and complacency is usually where the most interesting signals live. So where does that leave us? China has gone from flooding the world with silver to locking large portions of it inside its own borders, driven by a combination of retail savers priced out of gold and industrial manufacturers racing regulatory deadlines. COMEX registered inventories collapsed to multi-year lows earlier this year before partially recovering, leaving the market in a state that's tight by historical standards, but not necessarily in freefall. 6 straight years of global deficits have quietly consumed the equivalent of a full year of mine production, while roughly 70% of new silver supply remains structurally tied to decisions about entirely different metals. And hovering over all of it is a Federal Reserve under new leadership, still finding its footing, still divided internally, still trying to convince markets it's serious about inflation without triggering the very instability it's trying to prevent. And none of this guarantees where silver goes next. Nobody can promise that, and anyone who does is selling something. But the signal is real. A major economy has fundamentally changed its relationship with a strategic industrial and monetary metal. At the exact moment, global inventories are historically thin and central bank policy remains uncertain. Whether that turns into the next major move in silver or simply another chapter in an already volatile year depends on variables still unfolding, Chinese export licensing decisions, Federal Reserve meetings still to come, and whether industrial demand from solar, EVs, and AI infrastructure keeps accelerating at its current pace. What we do know is this: the story that started with a shrinking vault in New Jersey and a reversal in Chinese trade data isn't finished. It's still being written, one customs report and one warehouse update at a time. And now you understand it better than almost anyone watching the headlines without the context behind them. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next.